So you've done all the hard work. You've crunched the numbers, you've gathered the data, but now comes the really tough part, right? How do you turn all of that into a story that people will actually get and, more importantly, remember? Well, that's exactly what we're going to tackle. We're going to build a toolkit to do just that. Think about it. You've got these spreadsheets that are just packed with valuable insights, but if you can't present them in a way that's clear and compelling, all of that power is just lost. We are absolutely going to solve that problem right now. And here's the good news, okay? You do not need to be some kind of graphic design wizard or master 100 different complicated chart types. The source material for this explainer makes a fantastic point. For pretty much everything you need to do, a core toolkit of about a dozen visuals is all it's going to take. So, let's build that toolkit. We're going to walk through the absolute essentials that every communicator should have ready to go. And we're going to start with what might be the most powerful and, honestly, the most overlooked visual of all. That's right, simple text. I know, it sounds crazy, but when you only have one or two key numbers to share, putting them in a big, fancy chart can actually make them less impactful. Sometimes just putting the number front and center is the boldest, clearest choice you can make. For example, check this out. It's from a Pew Research report showing the percentage of kids with a stay-at-home mom in 1970 versus 2012. And yeah, it's a perfectly fine bar chart. It works. But just look at all that empty space for only two little numbers. And that's the question you should always be asking yourself. Just because I have numbers, does that automatically mean I need a graph? Is this chart actually adding value, or is it just taking up space on the slide? And bam, look at the alternative. By just making that key number, that 20%, the hero of the story, and putting the context right there beside it, the message is so much clearer, it's faster, and it just has way more punch. It's direct, it's confident, and you can't possibly misinterpret it. Okay, next up in our toolkit, tables. Now, tables are amazing when you need to show precise values for a bunch of different things. But look at this first version. All those heavy, dark borders are basically yelling for your attention, and the actual data, it's kind of getting lost in all that noise. Now watch what happens when we just lighten those borders up. See that? Immediately, the structure of the table it starts to fade into the background. And the numbers themselves, they're already easier to read. And finally, here's where we want to be. With super minimal borders, using clean white space to group the info, the data is now the undeniable star of the show. It just pops right off the page. Remember, your design should always serve the data, never, ever compete with it. All right, but choosing the right visual isn't just about making things clear. It's about being honest. And this, folks, is where things get really, really serious. Because when you get this wrong, you don't just confuse people, you can actually mislead them. Just take a look at this chart from a Fox News broadcast. It's showing a potential tax rate increase from 35% up to 39.6%. Now, forget the numbers for just a second. Just look at it. Pay attention to your gut reaction. That second bar looks huge, right? Like a massive jump. Well, that feeling brings us to a golden rule of data visualization. For a bar chart to be accurate, the y-axis, the vertical one, it must start at 0, no exceptions. Why? Because our brains are hardwired to judge the value by the length of the bar. If you chop off the bottom, you create this massive visual lie. And here it is. This is the big aha moment. On the left, you've got the original chart with an axis that starts at 34%. Visually, it makes the jump look like a 460% increase. But on the right, you see the honest version, starting at 0. The actual increase, it's just 13%. Same data, totally different story. You know, the source material just says it perfectly. This isn't just a simple design mistake, it's an ethical one. If even one person in your audience spots that you're manipulating a visual like this, you don't just lose the argument, you lose their trust. And that is incredibly hard to ever get back. Okay, so now that we've established those critical ground rules for integrity, let's add a couple more really powerful tools to our kit. These are specifically for showing how things change over time. Now, you're probably super familiar with the standard line graph on the left, right? It's perfect for showing trends over a bunch of different time periods. But check out its specialist cousin on the right, the slope graph. Think of it as a super simplified line graph that's designed for one specific job, to clearly show the change between just 2 points in time. And here's where you can really see its power. On the left, we've got a slope graph showing some employee feedback scores between 2 years. It's a little busy. But what if the real story, the most important story, is that career development actually went down? Well, on the right, by using color to highlight that one single line, we guide our audience's eyes directly to the most important insight. All right, let's talk about the most common, the most familiar chart of them all, the humble bar chart. Some people try to avoid them because they think they're too basic. That is a huge mistake. Their familiarity is actually their greatest strength. Think about it. Your audience doesn't have to spend any brain power learning how to read it. They can get straight to understanding the information. Our eyes are just great at comparing the lengths of the bars. And hey, quick pro tip for you. If your category names are getting long and squished, just flip the chart on its side. A horizontal bar chart is your best friend. So, we've looked at using simple text, we've cleaned up our tables, we've talked about tracking things over time, and we've celebrated the good old bar chart. Let's wrap all this up with the one big idea you need to remember. At the end of the day, it really all comes down to this. Your goal is not to make the fanciest, most complicated chart. Your goal is to communicate. It's about picking the simplest, clearest, most honest tool that will help your audience finally see the story that your data has been trying to tell all along. Think of these visuals as a whole new vocabulary. You now have a core set of tools that you can use to speak clearly, effectively, and with total integrity. So the only question left for you is, now that you have the toolkit, what important story are you going to tell first?